Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with crab stuffed deviled eggs. That's right, unlike most of the other recipes that are called crab stuffed deviled eggs, these are actually really stuffed with crab and just not topped with crab. Although they are topped with crab too, so I guess technically we should call these crab stuffed, crab topped deviled eggs. Although then the name would be way too long, much like this intro. But anyway, these are extremely easy to make and incredibly delicious. So here we go. In step one, of course, we're going to need some hard-boiled eggs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 6 cold eggs right from the refrigerator. We're going to put them in a pot and cover them with cold water. We want to make sure they're covered by at least an inch of water. We're going to place that on high heat, and we're going to wait for it to start to simmer. And at first, you'll see little bubbles form at the bottom, and then those little bubbles will start breaking up towards the surface. And then right about here, you're going to see those eggs start to dance a little. All right, you see that starting to move? And as soon as those eggs start to twerk and that pot starts to boil like that, I like to give it a little swirl. I'm not sure why I do that. It's just part of the ritual. And then we're going to quickly turn off the heat and cover it. And we're going to let that sit there with the heat off for exactly 17 minutes. Don't peek. Do not touch the cover. Don't do anything. Just wait 17 minutes. And once that timer rings, we're going to go over to the sink. We're going to drain out that hot water carefully. Just use your lid like that. And then we're going to shock these with cold water. But before we do that, a bonus trick. We're going to give them a little shake to kind of crack those shells a little bit. So put the lid on, give them a little shake, a little jostle, a little jiggle. Okay, so hard enough so those eggs kind of run into each other and kind of crack a little bit. You don't want to do it so hard to break the eggs open, but enough to at least crack the shell in a few places on each egg. And then we're going to fill that up with cold water, and I'm going to do that twice. So once I've given them the old cracka, we're going to fill it up with cold water once. I'm going to pour that water off, and then all I'm going to do is fill that back up with cold water and just let them sit there until they're completely cold, at which point you can peel. And because those hot eggs had little cracks when we hit them with the cold water, they say that makes them peel really easily, and I find that to be true. In fact, these were really fresh eggs, which are notoriously hard to peel, and that shell came off pretty easy. So we're going to peel those eggs, and then of course we're going to cut them in half. And please, people that said our 17-minute method didn't work, check this out. That is just absolutely perfect. No green ring. So if you're a chronic overcooker of the hard-boiled egg, please try this method. So anyway, that concludes the how to make hard-boiled eggs portion of the program, and it's time to proceed with our crab stuffed deviled eggs. So of course we're going to separate the yolks and the whites, and if you want, you can totally keep that in the fridge until you're ready to assemble. But I'm ready, so we're going to move on to the crab, and I'm going to use some beautiful local Dungeness crab. If you live in San Francisco, you are required by law to use this crab meat. What happens if you use canned snow crab? They arrest you and make you wear ill-fitting clothes. And in the stuffing, I like to use the whiter pieces and kind of save those redder, bigger chunks for the top. So I'm going to take a fork and kind of make 2 separate but equal piles. And the other good thing about this step is you can actually find if there's any little shells they left in there. Nothing puts a damper on a cocktail party like a lawsuit. So that lighter stuff, give it a quick chop just so it pipes a little easier. And we're going to add that half of the crab to our egg yolks, along with some mayonnaise, the real stuff, a little bit of Dijon, a little bit of hot sauce. Of course, that's our homemade sriracha. We're also going to give it a few drips of Worcestershire sauce and a little bit of lemon juice, not too much, just a touch. We'll also put a little touch of freshly ground black pepper and a pinch of salt. And then we'll also put in a little bit of Old Bay. And do not, under any circumstances, substitute with Young Bay. I know all your friends are doing it, but don't. You got to go with the Old Bay. And then last but not least, some chopped tarragon, the world's greatest crab herb, not to mention one of the world's best egg herbs. And then we're simply going to take our spatula and mix and mash this until it's smooth. And a little tip, this is way easier if you break up the egg yolks first. I never remember to do that. So if you're like me and make it more difficult for yourself, make sure you're being very thorough when you mix it. You don't want any big chunks because we're going to pipe this. You don't want that stuff getting stuck in the bag. And then once we've done that, all we're going to do is transfer that to a piping bag. I'm just using one of those disposable plastic ones. If you don't have one, just cut the corner off a plastic Ziploc bag. The difference between that and this is nothing. Same thing. Or just go low tech and use a spoon. Totally works. So we're going to fill those up. And of course, once they're all filled, go back around and pipe in any extra. Fill them all up. And once our crab stuffing's been piped in, it's time to top with a crab salad, which is the next step. So we're going to take the other half of the reserved crab. All right, those were the pieces that were a little bigger, a little redder. And I've kind of broken that up a little bit so it's easier to mix. And to that, we're going to add a little bit of freshly grated lemon zest. We'll also give it a little touch of cayenne. It's in my contract. And then just a tiny amount of creme fraiche or a little bit of thinned out sour cream, just a touch. I want this crab to be coated with just like a super light dressing. And then last but not least, a very healthy dose of Aleppo pepper. And we've talked about that before, just a gorgeous pepper, kind of a purple red, sweet, fragrant, kind of hot, but not too hot. I mean, I don't care how many pecks you pick. You can't pick a more perfect pepper for this procedure. And then I'm going to take a fork and we're going to mix that gently. And of course, you're going to taste to see if this needs a little salt. All right, whoever cooked these crabs to pick the meat out, boiled them in salted water, but we don't know how much they used. And once that's mixed up, go ahead and top your eggs. Try to distribute it evenly so there's no arguments. And yes, we're being kind of generous with the crab, but it's really not that much. And of course, you can use less if you don't want to be as extravagant. And if you can't afford crab, you can certainly substitute with lobster or caviar. And then a couple final touches before we plate these up. I'm going to do a little bit of fresh chive over the top. I guess technically that's more than a little, but it works so well here. And then, of course, they are deviled eggs after all, so we're going to have to give them one more dusting with the cayenne before we transfer them onto some kind of appropriate deviled egg serving platter. And just because there was a spot for it, I put a little piece of lemon there in case anyone wants a couple drops of lemon juice. Although, to be honest, they don't need it. That's more of a garnish. I mean, when you consider how delicious just plain, normal, regular deviled eggs are, and then you add in that sweet, delicious crab meat, and all those other luscious tidbits and assorted fabulous doodads we added, you're talking about a world-class hors d'oeuvre. But anyway, like I said, besides the delicious recipe, I also wanted to prove once again that our 17-minute method for hard-boiling eggs would work and does work and totally works, okay? So I really do hope you give these a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info, as usual. And as always, enjoy.